talk about what Senator Cory Booker's marathon speech really means in this moment. Was it performative? Was it impactful? Can two things be true at once? I think they can. Desmond, what were your initial reactions?
Oh, I think so we're talking about Cory Booker's speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it informative? Was it impactful? I
Yeah.
think it is a combination of two different things at once, right?
Yes.
Because I think that on one hand, we would want to say that what Cory Booker did was, in fact, incredibly impactful. Here
Yeah.
is a black man setting a record for the longest filibuster in the Senate chamber. He is overtaking Senator Thurgood. I keep forgetting this guy's name.
Strom Thurmond.
Strom Thurmond, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Racist segregationist
Yes.
who had previously held the record for filibustering the Civil Rights Act.
Of
Right. So,
1957. Yep.
yeah. So, yes, Cory Booker is making history in this moment. And I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely appreciate the fact that he did so. Right.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think the part of me that got a little hung up about all of this
Mm.
was the timing of it. Because obviously, this is something that he planned on doing. He had binders and binders with the talking materials. Something that he had said that he had started planning for this like several days ahead of time. He sort of like fast, essentially. So he was preparing to do this for quite some time. And he chose to do it on April 1st when there was no bill on the floor.
Right.
There was no piece of legislation that Trump was trying to send through the Senate at that time.
Right.
And so I think for me, I just question the timing of it. Because if you're going to do something like this, which I find to be valuable and find to be important, why did you choose that moment when you could have done it, a couple weeks prior when they were trying to pass that CR through the Senate? You could be doing it in the future when they're going to be trying to like gut Medicaid, trying to gut Social Security. And again, I'm not trying to say this is a bad thing. Sure. I'm just wondering, like, will you show up to do this again at that time when they're trying to do those things? Is somebody else going to do it? Is the Senate planning, or Senate Democrats planning on essentially doing this every other day to hold space on the Senate floor so that they cannot actually administer their agenda? Like, that's the thing I'm questioning right now, is just like the tactic here. Like, yes, I'm happy to see Cory Booker fighting. Yes. But at the same time, I do question how the fight is being presented.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie. This is Desmond from Independent Thought. We've never done a live here before, so we're trying this out. And I guess you can leave us questions and comments. Feel free to, and I will try to read them, or he will. To your point, in my fantasy life, I imagine now that they're all going to line up and say, hey, every 2 days, one of us is doing this, and we're all going to take turns, and it's all going to be wonderful. Well, everyone except Fetterman, because he didn't even show up on the floor, which I also thought spoke volumes about where he's at, because everybody was there at some point. I mean, the Senate showed up for Booker. But in terms of impact in that way, I agree. I think we need to see this happen in moments where it has the most devastation, right? Where it can create the most chaos and the most pain for the Republicans and their evil fascist agenda. But I do think that this was maybe, perhaps, a dress rehearsal. Perhaps it was a test run. Perhaps they were testing waters. How our constituents react? I'm not sure. I'm only trying to think how the trepidatious Democrats that we all know exist in the world might react. And I could see them being like, let's almost test this out to see if this is a thing we should do before we really do it. And I'm hoping I'm right. I don't know if I am. Someone just shared, Dory just said, Fetterman is such a disappointment. We can't count on him. I can't disagree. I'm from Pennsylvania. It's been a wild ride seeing him really descend in the way that he's chosen to move now that he's been elected. And there are plenty of people that are angry with him. I can tell you that here, especially in the Pittsburgh region where he's based, or where he was based. But I also think, Desmond, it takes, and I said this the night that I was talking about this on my own Instagram account, resistance takes many forms. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, Cory can do this, and this can be of value just as it is as a symbolic gesture of breaking this this for the longest speech of ruining, Strom Thurmond's, record, being a segregationist. I think that has its own merit and its own value in a more philosophical way. But to your point as well, we need a lot more than symbols right now. We need action. So what else would you like to see from the Democrats in terms of things they should be doing in this moment?
I think there is no piece of media that they should leave unturned, because let's talk about like what they cannot do, right? Like
Right.
they don't have the ability to stop any legislation from going through the House. They don't have the ability to block anything happening in the White House.
Mm-mm.
They only have the filibuster in the Senate, and even that's limited to a degree because there are certain types of bills that can go through the Senate that don't really require the Democrats to play along at all. These reconciliation bills.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to what power do you have, it's definitely limited. So yes,
Yeah.
in some sense, like what Cory Booker did was one of the few forms of power that they have.
Yeah.
Now, the question that I want to know is how much more are we going to see of that kind of a demonstration? And on top of that, I think that as we've seen, the Tim Walz's out there, the Bernie Sanders, AOC, we've now seen people like Representative Ro Khanna going out and doing these rallies.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that getting the public more engaged is its own form of power as well.
Yes.
Because as we are
Yes.
seeing more and more people like get activated in some way, it has a transcendent, I guess you would say, I'm kind of at a loss for words here,
Mm-hmm.
but essentially it has an impact on everyone at large.
Oh, yeah.
Right. We're seeing that last night with the election examples, seeing those Florida districts move double digits to the left,
Mm-hmm.
seeing
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin go from a 50-50 state to Susan Crawford winning by more than 10 points and moving every single county in Wisconsin to the left. It is obvious right now that people are angry with the Republican Party. It is obvious
Yep.
right now that people are upset with Donald Trump's administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that Democrats need to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Do all media everywhere. Keep highlighting every single thing that they do wrong. Do not give them a moment to breathe. Like if they make one misstep, be covering it from every angle on traditional media, in print journalism, on independent sources, on social media, everywhere you can think of. Like, do not give them a second to rest. I want you to be on top of every single mistake that they make. And honestly, they're not really calling them out enough as far as I'm concerned.
No, I agree.
Donald
I
Trump
agree.
just threatened war with Iran the other day.
Yes.
I haven't heard the Democrats talk about that. Like,
No.
why aren't they talking about that?
Right. And I also, to your point, I thought it was really interesting, speaking about independent journalism, that the first interview that Booker gave after he was finished with his speech was to Aaron Parnas, who is an independent journalist. And I really think that speaks also to the moment that we're in and the fact that you cannot ignore us anymore. Like you said you've been out here for 5 years, so have I on my own. And you can't ignore the power. I think we knew that, years prior, which is why we both kind of moved in that direction. But It's taken, I think, the mainstream media to recognize that. It's taken politicians a minute to get there. I was able to score a lot more interviews in this last election cycle than in the first one because I think they understand now the impact and the importance of meeting people where they are. And the Democrats as a whole, I think, need to figure that out and speak to the issues that their constituents actually care about, because the Republicans aren't doing that to their own constituents. They truly aren't. And the fact that we're seeing a lot of the Republicans almost having buyer's remorse, I think, is a testament to that in that moment. And this could be a way that the Democrats could capitalize on that if they would just sort of stop being so hesitant and fearful of perhaps saying or doing the wrong thing, because I think a lot of this is just that it's a marketing concern more than anything else.
Right. And honestly, I just want to take a quick moment to pause this. If there's anyone who's watching live right now and they want to chime in, like, tell us how you're feeling about the Democratic Party right now. Like, do you think that they could be doing more, or what do you want to see them doing that they're not doing?
Yeah.
Or what do you think that they're doing that is really working? But Oh, I'm sorry, Natalie. I kind of got lost there for a second. Could
No,
you
that's okay.
re-ask the question really quick?
Yeah, I just think in this moment, the Republicans, some of them are having buyer's remorse. I'm seeing that
Yes.
more and more. I follow More Perfect Union, and they are showing videos of Republicans saying, hey, I should not have voted for this guy. I don't understand that. He's been the same person he's been since 2016 and beyond, but okay, dudes. But what do you think that they could be doing on the left right now to really capitalize on the fact that the Republicans are losing popular momentum from their own ticket?
I mean, I I am not surprised to see people having buyer's remorse. Truth.
No.
I just think that there's a lot of people out there that make decisions about who they're going to vote for based on really quick pieces of information. Right.
Yeah.
And that's also coupled with a lot of people not really taking a second to like really dive into the news. I think a lot of people are
Yeah.
in social media bubbles and they
Hmm.
don't spend that much time thinking about the news, but when they do, they dive into their little bubble that we've all kind of created for themselves. And I think that the right wing propaganda machine has made a killing off of that. Like they
100%.
realize, just how easy it is to manipulate people, and
Hmm.
they have invested billions of dollars into doing so. And
Yeah.
it's how they're able to really maintain power. It's why you see, I think, to a degree, so many bad takes all over the place.
Hmm.
It's an extension of the machine at work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not really surprised to see that whatsoever. But honestly, I was wondering for you, you kind of live in a purple state.
I
Like,
do.
what is it like in Pennsylvania right now? Because Pennsylvania went red last time. So,
It went
how are
really
people?
red.
Yeah, how are people on the ground feeling about Donald Trump right now?
It's interesting because to your point, uh purple is a funny place to be because the tide can turn really quickly. I live in a very blue part of the purple state, which is in the Pittsburgh region, and
Yeah,
people are pissed off. They are angry with Trump. They're angry with Musk. They are angry with our senators, both Fetterman and McCormick. There have been
yeah,
continuous protests here against both of them almost weekly.
yeah,
To Baz's point, it's super red, but Lancaster was interesting. That's the kind of stuff that I'm finding fascinating is when you're leaving the city settings and you're going into areas of our state that have been more traditionally red and you're seeing them flip blue for the first time ever. That to me really sends chills down my body in a good way. Even areas where I grew up, in the suburbs of the city, which were more traditionally red, a lot of my friends that have since moved back to those neighborhoods are seeing them shifting very blue as well. So part of what we were talking about earlier too, I think part of this is generational. I think my generation, our generation, being millennial and Gen Zers, they're moving differently politically. They're looking at things differently. They don't have the same creature comforts that the boomers had, and even to a certain extent, Gen X had. And so, because so many things are now out of reach, Pittsburgh has become unaffordable for a lot of people in a way that it wasn't even 10 years ago. I think has really made an impact on how people are looking at local politics. But what I find fascinating about Pennsylvania in general is we have a lot of hate groups here. We have a lot of white supremacists here. We had a lot of people that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
yeah.
Outside of the cities, it's a lot of dairy land, it's a lot of farms,
Right.
and it's an aging population. We're not gaining a lot of new communities, and the communities that we are gaining are immigrant communities.
Right.
So, because of that, it is like this mishmash of conflicting cultures, interests, beliefs, politics, age groups, all of these things. So I think that's what keeps us really on our toes here when you're covering this state from a political space, because you really don't know which way the wind is going to blow here. I mean, one of the assassination attempts on Trump was here, 35 minutes from where I live.
Yeah.
So it is a really interesting place to live and work when it comes to being an independent journalist. But I do think seeing those signs in Lancaster, in some of these traditionally red spaces, turning purple, turning blue, could really be interesting as we're moving into the midterms, and the fact that that we've held on to the House, I think, by one seat here in Harrisburg is fascinating. And the last thing I'll say is we're trying to pass the Family Care Act, which is a paid family and medical leave legislation here in Pennsylvania, and it has bipartisan support and not lip service, like actual bipartisan support. I'm really keeping an eye on that issue because I think this will be the year, if it's going to pass, that it will pass. So really fascinating stuff happening.
You know, that's actually, that leads me right into my next thought here.
Yeah.
That is what I want to see the Democrats doing more of. I would love to see them on a national scale putting Republicans on their heels, because there
Yes.
is legislation like that, paid family medical leave, that is so wildly popular that all it would take for one Democrat to essentially bring that bill to the Senate
Yes.
floor and
Yes.
force them to not let it be voted on,
That's right.
or force them to vote it down. Like, you can humiliate the Republicans day in and day out by bringing very popular pieces of legislation in front of the American people, saying, we're all for this, we're ready to give this to you right now. They're blocking it. That is such easy politics.
Right.
You know,
And I
you
think that's where we got to like flip the script on them. It's,
yeah,
you know, instead of, what was it? Chuck Schumer was afraid that they were saying the shutdowns caused by Schumer, because he claimed the reason he wouldn't vote for the shutdown was because the Republicans were floating this nickname around. No, the shutdown would have been caused by the Republicans because of the terrible, you know, CR bill. But the fact that the Democrats, once again, they're so hesitant to be bold. Who cares what the Republicans label you as? The American people, we know what's going on, right? And so to me, to your point, I want to see that kind of bold legislation. It's not so much, is it going to pass? Is it who's supporting it and who's not? Because then that's going to give us a clear indicator of who needs to be running against whom the next time there's elections.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I am all about trying to find different ways to challenge the current status quo and finding ways to make sure that people's lives are actually improving, right? And
Yeah.
so if you want to actually improve the lives of people, I mean, you can do two things at once here. You can actually put through good legislation and put the Republicans in a terrible position. You want to make them as
Yeah.
unpopular as humanly possible, because the more unpopular you make them with the American people, the less likely Trump can actually get his agenda passed.
Oh, 100%. And to your point, too, Baz just shared Malone, the winner from Lancaster. We were just talking about that special election, likely won or held close in places like Manheim Township and East Petersburg, communities closer to Lancaster City that have been trending more moderate. That sort of kitchen table legislation would do numbers with that part. And I like these kitchen table legislations, because this is where we put bread on the table, right? These are the issues that impact our bottom line. And that is paid leave, that is health care for all, that's raise the wage to a living wage, that's affordable housing, actual real housing policies. These are the kinds of things, to your point, if we can force them to say, oh, we're not voting on that, that gives us an in for creating a strategy to win in the next election cycle. And I think those are the issues that we're going to pull the right, moderates, independents from, more so than perhaps other things that the Republicans are trying to make happen, like, you know, refuse abortion even if a woman's bleeding out in front of you. Like, that's not popular. Like, we could spin that.
I cannot get over how easy of a win it would
I know.
absolutely be, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there are some people that seem to get that and some people that don't. Like, I've heard Tim Walz talk about this. I think
Yes.
he actually has great political instincts.
Oh,
You know?
100%.
Yeah, I really do think he has great political instincts. And he was talking about this. He was just saying, he's like, hey, people are going to want us to come back and pass these really popular things. They're going to want us to pass universal health care. And he was talking about all the things that he got done in Minnesota. And I was like, he didn't look at his situation being like, oh, I have a 1-seat majority in Minnesota, I have to, like, you know, make sure I tap to the right and make sure that we're really bipartisan. He went the exact opposite direction, you know, passing so many different progressive agendas with a 1-seat majority in his Senate in Minnesota. And so, like, that's the kind of energy I want to see. Is like, obviously we don't have a majority right now, but that's not really the point. The point is, whatever leverage you have, use it all the way.
Yes. And I know we're going to wrap up here in a minute,
Yeah.
but I wanted to talk to you really quickly about Tim Walz, because he said something that I really loved, which is, he basically said, like, I want to burn up all my political capital doing good.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really lost here, which is exactly why we need term limits, which is exactly why we need to get, campaign finance reform in a real way done, because all of these career politicians, you shouldn't have a career as a politician. You should be a public servant, be there for, 4 to 10 years max, and then go back into the private sector and do something else. This idea that people are there for 30, 40 years and all it becomes is, let me just continue to fundraise so I can keep this job. Of course, nothing's going to really get done, because you can't be bold when you're trying to please everyone, which means you please no one. And I appreciate him saying that, because we need more people that want to get in, cause good trouble, and get out.
There are so many different layers to that conversation. I mean, gerrymandering comes up because you think about like how these. I mean, this actually happens in both parties. They have drawn these maps so that
Yeah.
they not really be challenged by the other side, right? So
Yes.
they all know that they have to just get through their primary, and then they basically have won their election. And then getting through their primary is as simple as making sure, especially on the DNC side, that you just crush any opposition that comes to you from your left. And so there are so many different problems, I think, within the machine here. I would love nothing more than to see it be easier for people to challenge incumbents. And then, yes, obviously, term limits after the fact. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that I think are broken right now with our elections and with our representation in Washington. But I do believe that the foundation to changing all of that is having conversations like this one, where we are talking amongst ourselves, talking about what needs to be changed, what isn't happening, what needs to happen. And so thanks for having a chat with me.
Desmond, anytime. I was just thinking the same thing, that, we should do this regularly here on Substack Live. And I hope that we can, because this was actually really fun and productive. And honestly, I agree. I think, when you look at this in sort of a metaphysical way, we have to speak into existence what we want to see happen. And until we're able to really articulate our dreams and our goals, it can't turn into action. So I think the first step of any solutions-driven journalist is to have important and impactful conversations, challenge each other in a way that elevates the whole conversation. And so I appreciate always having the opportunity to speak truth to power with you, my friend. And I look forward to hopefully doing this a lot more.
Absolutely.
Right.
Natalie, let's is there any
Yes.
other place that people can find your work at besides Substack?
I'm everywhere, you guys, unfortunately. I am on
Okay.
TikTok. I am on Threads. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the spaces at Natalie Bencivenga. And you can check out my website, nataliebencivenga.com. But I'm really trying to build a following here as well. And so please, if you haven't yet, check out my newsletter and subscribe. And what about you, Desmond?
We're just kind of like, I'm also everywhere, but really just focusing here on
Yeah.
Substack and also on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Those are like
Awesome.
my quartet right now. So
I like it. Great. Well, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other. And hopefully we'll do this again soon.
All right.
All right. Bye.